Some promises don't fade. They wait in the quiet until someone's strong enough to answer. Harrison Ford hadn't thought about Jimmy Thompson in years. Not until a girl in a threadbare coat shouted something only two people on Earth would ever understand. One name, one memory, one look at an old basketball, and it all came rushing back. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from today. And if this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It started on a breezy Saturday afternoon in Santa Monica, the kind where the ocean air carries a quiet hum of hope. A small outdoor charity event was taking place near the Pier Mata stage, folding chairs, local vendors, and a gathering crowd that buzzed with one name, Harrison Ford. Not the larger-than-life adventurer from the big screen, but the quiet man who'd come to support a firefighter relief fund, blending into the setting like he'd done all his life when the cameras were off. In that crowd was 12-year-old Sarah Thompson, barely visible among the legs and jackets and clutch phones of excited fans. Her jacket was 2 sizes too big, her shoes scuffed, and her hands gripped tightly around a worn-out basketball. The leather was cracked, the seams fading, and one signature, etched carefully across its surface, remained intact, her father's. It was all she had left of him. She held it like some children held teddy bears close to her chest, like a shield. The closer she got to the stage, the more she had to push through people. "Excuse me," she whispered, barely heard. "Sorry," she said again, ducking under a waving selfie stick, her breath catching as she squeezed through a wall of elbows. A man grumbled. A woman rolled her eyes. But Sarah didn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. She didn't know exactly what she would say, only that she had to reach him. The man her father once mentioned with a glint of pride in his voice. A man who owed her nothing but maybe he would care. Up ahead, Harrison Ford stood on the small stage, speaking softly into a microphone, his hair grayer now, his voice still steady, still unmistakably him. He wasn't trying to charm the crowd. That wasn't his way. He just talked about firemen, about sacrifice, about showing up for each other. Sarah froze for a second. Her legs felt heavy. Her heart thumped against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Then someone moved, and suddenly she saw a path to the edge of the stage. She took it, fast, before her courage slipped away. She stepped past the final row of chairs, ignored a volunteer waving her back, and walked straight toward the wooden platform. Harrison had just finished thanking the organizers when his eyes landed on her. For a split second, nothing moved. He blinked, looked at the ball in her hands, and then something shifted. His expression didn't change much, but his posture did. His voice caught slightly as he handed the microphone to someone else. She stood there, silent, staring up at him, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Sir," she said, barely above a whisper. "Please." The crowd hadn't noticed yet. No one had time to, but Harrison Ford took a step down from the platform, one hand resting at his side. His eyes were fixed on the basketball now, not her face. The ball, his brow furrowed not in confusion, but recognition. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and for a second, Sarah thought he looked afraid, or maybe just haunted. She didn't know what it meant, only that something in his gaze had changed, like he'd seen a ghost. A security guard moved forward, but Harrison raised a hand, just a slight motion, barely visible. The man stopped. Harrison knelt slightly, just enough to meet Sarah's eyes. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't commanding. It was quiet, measured, like someone speaking to a memory. Sarah looked down at the ball, then back at him. "It was my dad's," she said. He died in a fire last year." Harrison didn't respond at first. He just stared at the ball. Then, slowly, his eyes lifted back to her face. And in that pause, longer than it should have been, something unspoken passed between them. The kind of silence that holds history. He didn't say another word. Not yet. But Sarah knew. He remembered something, and somehow, her father was a part of it. The blue Honda sat tucked behind an old warehouse near the harbor, its windows fogged with the breath of two people trying their best to call it home. The muffler coughed every few days. The heater worked only when begged, and the back seat had long since been folded down into a makeshift bed lined with layered blankets and secondhand pillows. For Sarah Thompson and her mother, it was shelter. Temporary, her mom called it. But it had been 3 months now, and temporary was starting to feel like forever. Each morning, before the sun climbed over the cranes at the docks, Sarah woke up to the sound of gulls and trucks. She'd rub the sleep from her eyes, carefully fold the blankets the way her mom had shown her, and reach for the duffel bag tucked under the seat. There was a rhythm to the routine rituals that made the unlivable feel just a little more like life. A cracked, compact mirror balanced on the dashboard helped her brush her teeth using a bottle of water. One for her, one for mom, 2 sips only. She washed her face with a baby wipe, pulled her curly hair into a ponytail, and changed into the cleanest shirt she could find. Then she'd reach for the basketball. Always the basketball. Its leather surface was worn smooth from years of use, the faded signatures like old stories. But one name stood out bold, confident, and clear. Her dad's. He'd given it to her on her 10th birthday, just 2 months before the fire. She traced the letters with her finger every morning. A promise, a memory, a lifeline. Love you forever. Champ. The words written under his name had started to fade, but not in her mind. She still heard him say it sometimes, in that quiet voice of his, like he was right there beside her. Her mom worked at a diner 6 blocks away, pulling doubles almost every day. She left before the sun and came back after dark, always with a tired smile and sometimes, if the cook had been kind, a wrapped sandwich she claimed was extra. Sarah knew better. She also knew not to ask questions when her mom winced climbing into the car or when her cough rattled deep in her chest. The cold made everything harder. Some nights they ran the car heater for a few minutes before bed, burning precious gas they couldn't afford. Other nights, they just huddled close. School was Sarah's one chance to pretend things were normal. She walked the 23 minutes every morning, her backpack bouncing, her basketball keychain clipped to the zipper. Kids talked about video games, field trips, and what snacks they had in their lunchboxes. Sarah mostly listened. She didn't talk about brushing her teeth in parking lots or doing homework under streetlights. Instead, she smiled and nodded and kept secrets the way grown-ups do. After school, she went to the public park with the cracked concrete court. She liked it best when no one else was there. Just her, the echoes of her footsteps, and the steady bounce of the ball. Her dad had taught her drills crossover, behind the back, pivot, shoot. She remembered how he used to shout, eyes on the target, champ every time she lined up for a shot, and most of the time now, she whispered it herself, just like he would. One night, after practice and homework in the front seat, she asked her mom the question that had been dancing at the edge of her thoughts. Did Dad ever meet anyone famous? Her mom raised an eyebrow, amused. Famous like how Sarah shrugged. Like in movies or something. Her mom chuckled softly, coughing midway. He used to tell a story. Said he pulled some big Hollywood actor out of a fire during training. Said the guy looked stunned like he'd seen a ghost. Never said who it was. Just called him the guy with the hat. She shook her head. He told it like a joke. Nobody believed him. Said he made it up. But Sarah didn't laugh. Not this time. She glanced at the basketball resting between them, then looked out at the stars through the windshield. Something in her chest tightened. She didn't know why, but her father's old story suddenly didn't feel like a joke anymore. The court at Willow Park wasn't much to look at. The paint had long since peeled from the faded three-point lines. The backboards were weathered and cracked, and one of the rims leaned just a little to the left, like it had seen too many winters and too few repairs. But for Sarah Thompson, this was the place where memories lived. It was quiet after school, just the way she liked it. No shouting, no games, No one to judge the way her shoes squeaked or the way she talked to herself. Just whine in the trees, the occasional bark of a dog, and the sound of her basketball hitting the concrete like a metronome. She took her place at the top of the key, adjusted her stance, and whispered, eyes on the target, champ. The ball sailed through the air, clean and true, and dropped through the net with a soft swish. She smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it felt like home. Sarah didn't play for a team. She didn't have the right shoes, the right gear, or anyone to drive her to weekend games. But she had something else: repetition. Her father's drills still lived in her bones. Pivot, step back, cross over, jump, shoot. She practiced until her arms ached and her fingers stung, because for those 30 minutes each afternoon, she wasn't the girl who lived in a car. She was just a kid who loved basketball. The sound of footsteps pulled her from her rhythm. Laughter followed, loud, mocking. She didn't have to look to know who it was. Marcus and his crew, 3 boys from school, all in new sneakers and team hoodies, their backpacks slung low and their voices full of noise. Marcus always led the way, always had something to prove. Well, well, he said, tossing his ball from hand to hand as he approached. Look who's pretending to be Steph Curry. Sarah didn't answer. She picked up her ball and moved to the free throw line. Focused, quiet. Don't tell me you're trying out next month. One of the others laughed. They don't take charity cases. You know. More laughter. Sarah's stomach clenched. She told herself to ignore them. Just breathe. Just shoot. She bounced the ball once, twice, then lifted it. The shot flew high arc, perfect spin, and hit the center of the net with a crisp swish. The court went silent. For one perfect second, no one said a word. Marcus stared, his mouth open slightly, like he was trying to come up with something, anything to say, but he didn't. Sarah caught the ball as it bounced back, hugging it to her chest. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just turned away, walked to the sideline, and started gathering her things. She knew better than to stick around too long. Silence could turn sharp fast. But as she walked past Marcus, she caught his eyes. Just a flash, a glance, and something had changed. It wasn't respect, not yet, but it wasn't ridicule either. There was a pause in him, a question, maybe even curiosity. Sarah didn't let herself hope. Not really. People didn't change overnight, but she filed the look away, tucked it next to the memory of the shot, and carried it with her as she left the court. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had seen her not as a problem or a shadow, but as a player. The sun was dipping behind the trees as she crossed the street toward the library. Her feet were sore, her hands cold. But there was a fire in her chest that hadn't been there before. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But today, on a cracked court in an overlooked park, she'd made the shot that changed something, even if no one said a word. The cough came harder than before. Sarah heard it even before her mom opened the door of the car that night, stumbling slightly, one hand gripping the frame for balance. Her face was pale, lips dry, eyes glassy. She tried to smile, she always did, but the tremble in her hands gave her away. Sarah rushed to help her into the passenger seat, propping up an extra blanket behind her back. Just tired, her mom whispered. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not anymore. The shifts were wearing her down. The cold was stealing whatever strength she had left. And the cough, it was deep now, from the chest, with a sound that rattled the silence between them. Sarah sat there for a long time, her mom finally dozing off beside her, wrapped in 2 jackets and the fading warmth of a broken heater. The street lamp outside flickered. A distant horn echoed from the docks. She reached into the glove compartment, searching for an old math worksheet she'd misplaced. Instead, her fingers touched something else, a small leather-bound notebook, her father's. She hadn't seen it in months. She flipped through the pages slowly, the scent of smoke and aftershave still clinging faintly to the worn cover. Notes about drills, favorite quotes, old grocery lists. And then, Near the back, in his careful handwriting, just one line. If you ever need help, find him. He'll know what to do. No name, no explanation, just those 12 words. Sarah stared at the page, her fingers trembling slightly. Her heart thudded in her chest, louder than it should have in the quiet car. Find him. She thought about the look Harrison Ford had given her, the way he'd frozen, the way his eyes had locked on the basketball like it carried a ghost. Her dad had always told wild stories, but one had stuck with her, the one he told just once, in a whisper like it was too fragile to speak aloud. That during a fire training years ago, he'd saved a man, not just any man, a movie star, one wearing a hat, Indiana Jones, he'd said with a wink. But no one believes me. She hadn't, not really, until now. Sarah reached for the basketball in the back seat, running her fingers across her dad's signature, the words below still faintly visible. Love you forever, champ. Her mind moved quickly, piecing it all together. The look Harrison gave her, the note in her father's book, the old story. And then her breath caught something she'd overheard just 2 days ago at the library. Did you hear a kid had whispered to his friend, Harrison Ford's coming to the community center next week. It's for some firefighter fundraiser. My dad's volunteering. She hadn't thought much of it then. But now it felt like everything was pointing to one moment. One man. She picked up her phone, fingers shaking, and searched for the event. It was real. Saturday, 2 days from now. Open to the public. Her eyes drifted to her mother, still asleep, her breath wheezing softly, shoulders hunched beneath the blankets. They were out of options, no savings, no relatives, just this car, this ball, and one name that had lived in her father's voice like it meant something sacred. Sarah sat in silence, the notebook in one hand, the ball in the other. She didn't know what she would say, but she knew she had to go. For her mom, for herself, for the memory of a promise written in fading ink but etched deeper in her heart. Harrison Ford might not remember her father. He might not believe her. But something in the way he looked at that basketball told her otherwise. Maybe he was the one her dad had meant, the one who would know what to do. The cold bit harder than usual that morning, the kind that sank through layers no matter how many jackets you wore. Sarah and her mother arrived at the community center 3 hours early, hoping to beat the crowd, but the crowd had beaten them. A long line curled around the block, full of bundled-up people clutching flyers and coffee cups, stamping their feet to stay warm. Some held cameras, others held hope. Sarah held her basketball. They found a spot near the middle of the line, tucked close together for warmth. Her mother's cough had gotten worse overnight, deeper, raspier. Sarah could feel her trembling as they stood side by side, the wind cutting through their thin jackets. You sure about this? Her mom asked softly. Sarah nodded. We're not leaving. 2 hours passed. The line grew tighter, restless. Security moved in, setting up barriers. Volunteers whispered into radios. Then a murmur swept through the crowd like electricity. He's here. Sarah rose on her toes, trying to see. A sleek black SUV rolled up to the curb. Doors opened. Flashbulbs popped. And there he was, Harrison Ford, stepping into the cold with a quiet nod, dressed in a heavy coat and a scarf pulled tight. No fanfare, no entourage, just him. The crowd surged forward. Sarah felt herself shoved sideways as people pressed in, arms reaching, voices rising. Mr. Ford, over here. Can I get a picture? She tightened her grip on the basketball, trying to hold onto her mother's hand, but someone cut between them. She turned, panic rising. Mom! But her mother was gone, swallowed by a wall of bodies. Mom, Sarah shouted again, spinning, the ball still clutched in her arms. A man stepped backward into her, nearly knocking her over. She stumbled, caught herself, and looked up. Harrison was only 20 feet away, walking slowly toward the center doors. nodding politely, but clearly ready to disappear inside. She opened her mouth, tried to call to him, but her voice was drowned in the roar of the crowd. He was walking away. Her chest tightened. This was her chance. Maybe her only one, and it was slipping through her fingers. She looked down at the ball, her father's signature, his promise. Find him. He'll know what to do. And then, without thinking, she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted the only thing she could think of, the one thing no one else in that crowd would ever yell. Blade Runner. The spin move 1981, left foot, pivot, elbow block. The crowd didn't notice, but Harrison did. He stopped mid-step, his shoulders straightened. Slowly he turned, eyes scanning the sea of faces. His expression shifted, no longer polite, alert, searching, and then he saw her. A girl in a ragged coat, standing alone, arms wrapped around a beat-up basketball, their eyes locked. Sarah didn't move. She couldn't. The noise around her faded. The wind fell silent. In that moment, it was just them. Harrison stared at the basketball, his gaze narrowing. Then, like a memory rushing in, he took a step forward. Another. He was close now, close enough to see the faded signature etched into the leather. His face changed, the kind of change that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. A flicker of disbelief, then recognition, then something deeper, something older. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Where did you get that ball? Sarah swallowed hard. Her heart was pounding. She looked down at the ball, then back at him. It was my dad's, she said. He died last year, in a fire. Harrison blinked slowly. The name on the ball seemed to root him in place. His jaw clenched. He took a breath that sounded like it had traveled through decades. What was his name, Jimmy? She said. Jimmy Thompson. A name like a match, and in Harrison's eyes, a fire lit. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. And maybe, in a way, he had. The fluorescent lights in the hospital waiting room buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow over the scratched plastic chairs and vending machines humming in the corner. Sarah sat hunched forward, hands wrapped around the basketball like it was the only thing holding her together. Her mother was somewhere behind those double doors, surrounded by doctors and machines, her body fighting for breath. And sitting across from Sarah, quietly, without press or cameras, was Harrison Ford. He hadn't said much or since the drive here. Just rode in silence, one hand gripping the door handle, the other occasionally brushing against his coat pocket like he was holding something that mattered. Now, as the nurse passed by and the minutes dragged on, he finally leaned forward. Your dad, he said, voice low, steady. Jimmy Thompson. He saved my life. Sarah didn't speak, just looked at him, wide-eyed. It was back in '91. He continued. I was filming a sequence for Backdraft. We were doing a live fire exercise with real crews. I insisted, wanted it to feel authentic. They warned me, but I was stubborn, thought I could handle it. He paused, staring at the floor. The smoke rolled in faster than we expected. Lost my line of sight, turned a corner and the backdraft hit. Flames like a freight train. I couldn't move, couldn't see. He looked up, eyes clouded, and then out of nowhere, this guy full gear, oxygen tank, visor down, comes barreling through the smoke. He grabbed my jacket, yanked me out like I weighed nothing. Didn't even hesitate. I hit the pavement coughing, shaking. When I looked up, he was there, mask off, grinning like it was just another day at work. Sarah felt her breath catch. He introduced himself. Harrison said, Jimmy Thompson, said he liked my movies, but that I'd made a terrible firefighter. We laughed. He handed me a water bottle, and this. He nodded toward the basketball in her hands. He said it was his lucky ball, that it had been with him since college. He said, if you're going to keep risking your life pretending to be guys like me, you should carry a little luck too. I tried to give it back. He wouldn't take it. Sarah ran her fingers over the leather, tracing the signature again. A week later, Harrison continued. He showed up at the studio, said he'd been thinking, that he had a daughter, that he'd been promoted, said the job was getting more dangerous. He gave me a card with his name, a photo of you when you were just a toddler, and this notebook. Harrison reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered notebook, the same kind Sarah had found in the glove compartment. I kept it, he said softly. Never really knew why, just did. He looked at her now, eyes steady. Before he left that day, he said something I'll never forget. He said, "If anything ever happens to me, find my girls. Make sure they're okay. Promise me that." Sarah blinked back tears. "I promised," Harrison said, voice tightening, "but I never heard from him again. And I didn't know how to find you. I tried. I did. But then time passes. Addresses change. And all I had was a name. Jimmy Thompson. And a little girl in a photo who looked just like you." He leaned back, rubbing his hands together. "I saw the ball that day at the event, and for a second I thought I was imagining it. That same dent on the side, same initials. It was like he'd stepped out of the past and put it right in front of me." Sarah looked down at the ball, then back at him. "My dad, he never told me." She said, "He wouldn't." Harrison replied, "He didn't do things for attention. He did them because they were right." The doors opened behind them. A nurse appeared. "Mrs. Thompson is stable," she said gently. "You can see her now." Sarah stood slowly. Harrison rose too. Before they walked through the door, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your dad saved my life. I think it's time I did what I promised him." The wind in Wyoming carried a different kind of stillness. It moved through tall pine trees and brushed against the porch of a small guest house nestled at the edge of a quiet clearing. The sky stretched endlessly above it, open and clear, like a promise. Inside that guest house, Sarah Thompson stood at the window, basketball in hand, watching a group of deer move through the distant field. Her mother was resting in the next room, her cough nearly gone, color back in her cheeks. The hospital stay had helped, but it was the calm here that was doing the healing now. Peace had a way of settling into the bones, if you let it. Harrison Ford had offered the guest house without hesitation. "Just until they found their footing," he said. But something about the place felt like it had been waiting for them. Sarah spent her mornings running drills on the small court behind the house and her afternoons finishing schoolwork online. Her evenings were filled with stories told softly, in that low voice of Harrison's as he taught her about the game, about life, and most of all, about her father. One morning, over breakfast, he set a folded piece of paper on the table in front of her. A letter from the director of the Chicago Youth Basketball Academy. Full scholarship, immediate acceptance, training, travel, opportunity, everything she'd once dreamed of but never dared to hope for. Sarah read it twice, her hands shaking, then she quietly slid it back. "I can't go," she said. Her mother looked up, startled. Harrison didn't say anything. "Mom needs me," Sarah continued. "She's just getting better. I can't leave her." Her mom reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Sarah's. "You're not leaving me," she said. "You're following your path, just like your father would have wanted." "I'll be fine." Sarah hesitated. But what if her mom squeezed her hand? If your dad were here, he'd already be packing your bag. There was silence for a moment. Then Harrison stood and disappeared down the hallway. When he returned, he held something small in his hand, a metal object, dulled with time but still polished where fingers had held it often. He placed it in front of her. It was a firefighter's badge. On the back, scratched faintly into the metal, were the initials J.T. "I've kept this," Harrison said, his voice rougher than usual. "Since the day he saved me. Jimmy took it off and gave it to me. Said if I ever forgot what mattered, to hold it. I think I think he meant for me to give it to you. Sarah picked it up slowly. It was warm, somehow, like it had been waiting for her all this time. It's yours now, he said, not just as a keepsake, but as a reminder. You carry more than his name, you carry his spirit. She clutched the badge in one hand, the basketball in the other. The weight of both felt right, balanced. That night, she sat on the porch, the wind tugging gently at her hair. Her mom was inside, on the phone with a woman from the foundation where Harrison had pulled strings to offer her a job admin work for a firefighter support fund. Something quiet, something steady, something new. Sarah looked out into the stars, badge in her pocket, and thought of her dad. Not as the man lost in a fire, but as the man who'd left behind something brighter. A trail, a legacy. She whispered the words without thinking, eyes on the target, champ. And somewhere in the silence, she could almost hear him answer. The gym was bright and polished, the kind of place where every echo of a sneaker felt sharp and clear. Rows of bleachers stretched along the walls, filled with families, classmates, and the nervous energy of a first game. Sarah stood at the edge of the court, lacing her shoes slowly, her jersey already pulled over her warm-up gear. Number 19, her father's number. The fabric felt heavier than cotton. It felt like memory. The coach called for warm-ups, but before Sarah could stand, her mother knelt beside her and placed something in her hand. A folded envelope, worn at the corners. He left it with Harrison, her mom said softly. Told him to give it to you when the time was right. Sarah opened it slowly. The paper inside was yellowed slightly, the handwriting steady and familiar. If you're reading this, it means you made it. Not because of luck, not because of anyone else. Because of you. You've got more heart than anyone I've ever known. I know you're scared. That's okay. But play the game the way you live your life. With heart. Always with heart. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, eyes closed. For a moment, the gym disappeared. All she could hear was his voice, the warmth of it, the steadiness. Then the coach called her name. She stood, slid the letter into her backpack, and stepped onto the court, from the far end of the bleachers, high in the last row where no one would notice. Harrison Ford sat quietly. No press, no speeches, just a man in a dark jacket, hands folded, watching the daughter of an old friend. Sarah took her place at the free throw line for pregame drills. She bounced the ball once, twice, then whispered under her breath, eyes on the target, champ. The shot arced clean and true. Nothing but net. The game began. Fast, aggressive, but Sarah moved like she belonged. She didn't try to do everything. She didn't need to. She passed with instinct, cut through defenders with ease, saw plays before they unfolded. Her teammates responded to her rhythm. The court became quiet in her head, like it always did when she was in sync. Midway through the third quarter, with the score tight and the crowd on edge, Sarah took a pass at the top of the key. A defender rushed her. She pivoted, crossover, behind the back, step back. That same move her father taught her. That same move Harrison had practiced with her in Wyoming. She added one hesitation, one beat of her heart, and then she released. The gym held its breath. Swish! The crowd erupted. From the top row, Harrison smiled, just once. Not for the shot, for the way she made it. When the game ended, Sarah walked off the court to cheers and high fives, but she didn't look for the crowd. She looked up. Harrison was already gone. Later that night, back in her dorm room, she pinned her father's letter above her desk. Next to it, she placed his badge and her jersey, 19. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the basketball he once gave her. Her hands had grown since then, but it still fit. She didn't cry. She didn't need to, because she knew now what he meant. Playing with heart wasn't just about the game. It was about how you live, how you carry others with you, how you remember, and how you keep a promise, even if it takes years, even if you don't say it out loud. Some legacies are passed down through blood, others through silence, action, and a ball that still bounces. And on that court, in that moment, Sarah Thompson didn't just play, she became everything her father had ever hoped she would be. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.